to record. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Connie Pascal, and this is MI Colloquium. Our topic for this evening is one of my favorites, and it is something that we have had a chance to talk a little bit about before. We've got one other colloquium that we have done in the past on this topic called Found in Translation. If you look on our MI Colloquial playlist, you can find that. But now we're going to take a look at what's called New Horizons in Children's Book Art. So again, our speakers for this evening are Marc Aronson, and he will be here. Claudia Zoe Bedrick, who is the publisher of Enchanted Lion Books, a Brooklyn-based children's book publisher, and Nicole Simpson, who is the assistant curator for the Zimmerli Art Museum here at Rutgers. So again, a video of this will be available. Please stay mute throughout the presentation, but definitely pop into chat. I'll be monitoring chat. We like a lively chat as well. And again, put any of your questions there. So here's our erstwhile agenda, not quite exactly what we had expected because, again, Dr. Aronson is running a little late. But with that, I am going to actually stop I'm going to introduce our two speakers, and then I'm going to say their names, basically, and then ask them to introduce themselves. So Claudia Zoe Bedrick and Nicole Simpson are our two speakers. And I'd like to ask Claudia there's Marc. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll ask Nicole to do the same.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia, and as Connie said, I'm the publisher of Enchanted Lion books. I'm also the editor and art director. We are 21 years old. We publish books in translation and have published books from many countries around the world, translating from many languages. And we also publish original books and some reissues of books from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. In 2020, we launched an imprint called Unruly, and that imprint focuses on picture books, but picture books for teen and adult readers. And it advocates for picture books as a medium, not as an age group. We tend to think of picture books as an age group and as a form of literature meant for kids, but it's really a medium for storytelling, and any kind of storytelling can take place in that unique relationship between word and image. So
Cool.
that's what
I've seen your books. They're wonderful.
Thank you, Connie.
Nicole, give us a little bit of a background, and welcome, Marc.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Simpson. I'm one of the curators at the Zimmerli Art Museum here at Rutgers University. I've worked here for about 8 years now. I previously worked for the print collections at New York Public Library, at Christie's Auction House, and at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And at the Zimmerli, I oversee a wide range of exhibitions and also work extensively with our collection of original illustrations for children's literature and exhibitions, drawing from that collection and from outside loans. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to toss it to our host for this evening, Associate Professor Marc Aronson. Take away, Marc.
Thanks, everybody. Apologies for being late. DC traffic was not kind. I am in a very unprepossessing hotel. Anyway, I am here because I have the great fortune of teaching every spring a course in international children's literature, which I hope some of you will be able to take, and which includes an optional trip to Bologna, the children's book fair there, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that has given...
Where's the fair?
Bologna, Italy.
Bologna. But going to Bologna, where the books from many, many countries from around the world are shown, and artists from many parts of the world come, has really given me a chance to see a great variety of picture books from many ages and in many styles. And I really wanted to share with all of you and have Claudia share Thank you. That is the class. I wanted to have everybody share with you some of how your eyes can be opened by what ways that picture books are envisioned that go beyond, things that may be familiar and that show possibilities for narration and illustration and text that I think you might find exciting and might give you ideas for what's possible in books for young people. So that's what I do, and that's why I'm here. And I think, Claudia, you were starting to talk about what you do at Enchanted Lion, and I thought maybe I would invite you to keep going. We were up to Unruly Books.
Sure. So we were up to Unruly Books. So that's our imprint, and really over the 21 years of the company's existence, we have been focused on many kinds of diversity, but some of those forms are different from what we tend to think of here, all of which are important when it comes to representation and culture and so on. But in our working with books in translation, we've been focused on many kinds of aesthetic differences and narrative differences, and looking at the possibilities for telling stories in ways that might be quite unconventional compared to a more standard American way of telling a story, which is usually in a structure with a beginning and an end and an arc and a kind of dramatic confrontation or some kind of tension that resolves itself. But if you begin looking at the picture books made in many different parts of the world, that's not the case at all. And really, the book can be very episodic or dreamy, open-ended. It can almost be about nothing and almost have no more of a narrative style than opening up questions and depicting new situations as you move along. So we thought it would be really fun and informative for kids and parents and readers here to have more access to those books than they were having in the early part of the century when we started publishing. I wanted to share with you some of the books we've been doing just to take a look into what that might really mean on the page and in practice. And the first book I was going to start with is one published this year. It's from Nicole, who is an Argentine, a very well-known Argentine book creator. She was a recipient of the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award. She really is at the top of her craft. And she very committedly and enthusiastically makes books for children. And she talks a lot about how children are her audience and are the most demanding audience she could possibly consider having. This book is fascinating because it started out, it's based on a shawl that was given to her when she went to the West Bank, and she met with a bunch of Palestinian artists and women. And the scarf was given to her in gratitude. And living with this scarf, she thought, how cool would it be to actually tell a story based on this scarf, starting off from the scarf. And the idea she had was, well, a scarf has a front side, the kind of display side that's so properly done, and the stitching is so careful and so beautiful, but then it has this flip side, this back side, which is all kind of threads and like this forest of loose ends and knots and so on. And so she took that difference between the front and the back of the scarf as the premise for her story. And it's about a little girl whose grandmother and some other people in the town tell stories about the backside of the cloth, like this other world coming from that chaotic, disordered, uncertain realm versus the very orderly realm in which they actually live their daily lives. So this is the orderly realm in which they live, but then this is the flip side that is whispered about, where it's disorderly and confusing, and maybe creatures live there and so on. So it's a really unusual way of telling a story, and you can see the beauty of her collage and the images she created to fit with these component parts of the scarf itself. It's done in the format of kind of a little bit, it gets into a little bit of a kind of graphic novel layout with the cutouts and the panels, and having more text than a typical picture book. But you know, we published it as a picture book, and it really is for readers 6 and up. And she's playing here with kind of all the density of the loose threads on the back side, again, to tell a story about looking through one side to the other. And the overall story is really about how we might live worlds within worlds, you know, and it's not just about the orderly and the rational, that there could always be this more mysterious experience kind of at the back of our everyday conscious lives. And I feel like those themes are very prevalent in philosophy. They're very prevalent in adult literature. You know, they're very prevalent in kind of like any kind of religious esotericism, but like not really in picture books. So she's bringing this sort of like wonderful, deep idea of human existence into the form of the picture book. And it's really gorgeously done. So that was published under Enchanted Lion as a picture
Do
book.
you mind if I say something here? Just
Not at all. Dip in as
it
much
looks
as jump in as much as
gorgeous.
you like.
We talk about his soul in the international class, certainly. But you know, historians talk about invention of weaving, which was very plausibly invented by women, and it may
Correct.
started with braiding each other's hair. It may have started working with reeds, and but was so crucially important because weaving is not just for clothes. It built houses, and how you could build mats into roofs and walls. It was made for carrying materials. And I think just weaving, and then even all the way late in the Bauhaus, it was like the women were sort of confined to weaving because it was considered not as, you know, high art as what the men were doing. But then the women's weaving became so fascinating. People like Annie Albers. And yes, exactly. Mary Ellen talks about computers based on Jacquard looms. And I think elevating weaving to its kind of primacy in human history, which you're not doing that in a kind of non-fictional way, but you're still getting at some of the sides of weaving and the stories that can be contained. And just the last thing, I just finished reading At the Existentialist Cafe, which is sort of a history of existentialism. But in talking about Heidegger, there are ideas about gaps that remind
Right.
of what you showed there.
I have a more practical, how do you mass produce, or what kind of scale can you produce a book like this? Because their textiles are in the book itself?
No. So this is scanning. So basically is all scan the textile.
Interesting.
And then we printed the book in Italy on a kind of toothy paper, like a paper with some touch to it. So, you know, it's a nice paper for the book, but no, this is all, it's all scanned. So it's just, it's
Wow.
all very carefully scanned, and then we
Got it.
yeah, reproduced it just as any
Beautiful.
normal book would be printed.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a really beautiful one.
Well, we have a couple of fiber artists and a weaver here in our
You
class.
see, all of that can go into bookmaking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't have to stop with the loom. So
good
the
idea,
next
Mary
thing
Ellen.
I wanted to go to was am I sharing it correctly? No, I'm not sharing it
Not right
correctly.
now.
What did I just do? Share.
Mark, it looks like you have a fan in Alexia.
I saw. Hi, Alexia.
So this is our, I'm trying to think. This is, I think our second, no, it's our third Unruly book. So this is the third book we published under Unruly. It was originally a Mexican picture book, and we published it not for children, but for teens and adults, for the reason that this is the case cover. So this is the jacket, and this is the imagery on the binding of the book. And it's a very dark story about, and it's a story within a story, so it's quite complicated to read. And it's also very dark. So the story is of a boy who discovers that his father is writing a history of violence of the violence perpetrated against children. He discovers this and becomes obsessed with this and wonders why, as a child, he's heard nothing about this sort of secret, concealed history. But then for us as the readers, in the meanwhile, we come to understand through reading the book that there is something amiss in the relationship between the boy and his father, and there might be some sort of violence happening in that relationship as well. So it's a ghost story, it's a work of literary fiction, it's kind of horror at the same time, and really not for children, but it uses the picture book medium and graphic design to tell a story that is highly visual, and important in a visual sense, in how the story unfolds and in how the story is communicated. So this is a very good example of picture book as medium, where there is a relationship between word and image that is specific to the medium, but it is not in any sense a children's picture book. It's another kind of picture book, in which a whole other type of literature is being shared, and composition and graphic design, sizing, placement, all of this is really important to the ideas being shared and communicated through the story, as well as the atmosphere and the mood, and the color palette, the layout, and the compositions really do their own work in creating a real feeling of discomfort, a real feeling of unease and uncertainty, and that mirrors and picks up on the story itself. The artist, graphic designer, is kind of Mexico's equivalent of Milton Glaser, as far as I've understood it. He really is at the height of his craft, and the author is an interesting person. He writes for adults and he writes for children, and he felt that he could no longer go on and write for children authentically without writing about the violence that is perpetrated against them, and not just the violence of 300 years ago, not just the violence of the Middle Ages, not just the violence back in Egypt when they would drown the children, not just the violence, of the Crusades or, any kind of past moment of history, but the violence of today, and the violence that you can think of from so many points of view that we as a society don't want to talk about. It's uncomfortable and we don't want to think about it. But it's not just trafficking kids, but it's keeping them home maybe for a whole year during COVID. Was that the best decision? Did it serve the children well? Did it serve something else well? Like, these are difficult things to talk about, and we tend to shy away from them, but we don't always have kids' best interests at heart. And if you look at Maoist China or you look at Nazi Germany, you realize that some of our worst ideas as adults are the ideas we visit first on children. And that's kind of where the ethics also of, children's book publishing comes up, which is that the stories we give to children are stories in which we are usually advocating for and making space for solidarity values, ideas of kindness and justice and belonging and against bullying. And, we really are advocating for our highest ideals. And yet maybe in practice as a society, we don't always have those ideals in mind when it comes to children, their education, their place in the world, and how we do or do not bother to think about them. But the
Fantastic.
author really wanted to create this book so that we would have to talk about these things. I would not say in publishing this book, it has opened up that conversation, because it's not really a conversation people want to have. So I would say that a lot of the people who have been paying attention to this book and buying it and excited about it have been more people who are excited about it because of the graphic challenge and difference it offers, and also the narrative difference it offers, but not really delving into the content too much,
Got it.
say.
Thank you, Claudia. Nicole, let's go ahead and move
Wait,
on.
but just before, there was a question, Claudia, that I
Oh,
saw
sorry, yeah.
in the
It's
conversation
Megan.
about how you market, how you get your books to young people and teenagers. What are the mechanisms of getting from crafting the book to the world?
Should we take that up in the Q&A period and let
Sure.
Nicole go
Sure.
now?
Sure. Nicole.
Okay. I will share my screen. Can everyone see?
You can.
Yeah.
Zimmerli in the spring.
Yes. So I wanted to give everyone an overview of the collection and the exhibitions that we do at the Zimmerli Art Museum. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we are the University Art Museum at Rutgers University. We're one of the largest university art museums in the country. We have over 65,000 works of art. And historically, our strengths have been French 19th century art, particularly works on paper, American art of the 20th century, and we have the world's largest collection of Soviet nonconformist art. And within those larger collections, we also have a smaller but rich and wonderful collection called Original Illustrations for Children's Literature. And it numbers around 4,000 works, all primarily given through donation, over half of which are by the artist we see here, Roger Duvoisin. So originally a Swiss, from Switzerland, Duvoisin settled in America, living in New Jersey for most of his career. He was an extraordinarily prolific and wonderful author and illustrator. And we have here just some of the examples of the works we have in the collection. On the left, for his very first book, A Little Boy Was Drawing, the original pen and ink and gouache illustration for the book. Also for all of the illustrations for White Snow, Bright Snow. So the first book that he and Alvin Tresselt won the Caldecott Medal for. And we also, you can see on the lower right, we have many like preparatory materials, so jacket designs and paper designs. And this one is for Petunia, the first in a series of books following this sort of mischievous and humorous goose named Petunia. We also have the rest of the collection covers about 100 different illustrators. When the collection was being formed, there was it was limited to American 20th century illustrators with a particular emphasis on those who lived or worked in New Jersey. But it encompasses a wide time period and artists working in multiple different styles and materials. So here are just some examples you see here. So we have watercolor, gouache, these extraordinary paper constructions by the Japanese American artist Takayo Noda that you see on the lower left. And we're also very lucky at the Zimmerli to have a dedicated gallery called our Duvoisin Gallery in honor of Roger Duvoisin, where we have regular exhibitions of children's illustration. So from when these started in the mid-1970s till I would say when I arrived at the Zimmerli, which was around 2016, there were about 50 exhibitions drawing from this permanent collection. So I continued mining our permanent collection for exhibitions when I got here. So this is one of the earlier exhibitions I did, which was called Stories of Wonder, Children's Tales from Around the World. So looking at, it was five different illustrators who were reinterpreting traditional folk tales or fairy tales. The works you see hanging on the wall here are by Fuku Akino, a Japanese woman artist. And these are for the book called The One-Legged Ghost, which reinterprets a traditional Japanese ghost story in these beautiful watercolor illustrations. And some other works from that exhibition. Both of these sort of show the different cultural interpretations of what would be a similar story. So on the left, there are a series of works by Maginell Wright Barney for an unpublished set of illustrations illustrating Hans Christian Andersen's Thumbelina, so the 19th century tale. And then on the right are a series of illustrations by Tony Chen for a book called The Cucumber Stem, which was based on a Bengali folk tale of somewhat similar to Thumbelina, of a miniature boy who went on all of these grand adventures. And like Thumbelina, the great prize at the end was getting married. And the works on the right, those are actually, we received through the donation a lot of preparatory material. So the actual material the artists used in production of the book. And those are actually the original color separations. So in a pre-digital era, artists had to hand create on basically like plastic sheets individual designs for each color that would be printed. So we try, if we have the material in these exhibitions, to also educate audiences about the process of illustration.
Fantastic.
Starting in 2018, I was thinking about how the collection had been used and the exhibitions, and I really wanted to move beyond the permanent collection and be able to showcase some of the extraordinary diversity in contemporary children's publishing. So we started borrowing works directly from illustrators for exhibition. And the first one we did was here. The Art of Turning Pages, illustrations by Lulu Delacre for Sonia Sotomayor's life story. So this was Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor's first children's book. And it was basically a child-friendly version of her adult autobiography that had been published with these extraordinary illustrations by Lulu. We also included in the show some of the preparatory work that the illustrator had used in making her illustrations. So photographs of Sonia Sotomayor throughout childhood that she used to base her representations on. And I will also say that this inaugurated bilingual children's exhibitions at the Zimmerli. So thinking about our New Brunswick community, which is majority Spanish speaking, we started translating all of the exhibition text, so our intro text and any label copy we would have into Spanish. And that continues to this day and has now expanded museum-wide.
Fantastic.
I also partnered with my colleague in Julia Tulowski, who's the curator of Soviet nonconformist art, on this exhibition, which was a celebration of the works of Vladimir Radunsky. So thinking this would give a sort of good introductory overview into the ideas espoused by nonconformist artists. And we had 4 wonderful series of illustrations here, all showing the breadth of Radunsky's work. He worked as both an author and an illustrator in many different styles and techniques. On the lower right, you see a series of illustrations for Because, which was written by the acclaimed dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov about a grandmother who loves to dance and her grandson who is embarrassed by it. Some of the other works in there, here's a series of illustrations for The Mighty Asparagus, which was based on a Russian folktale called The Turnip. And for these illustrations, Radunsky was actually collaging reproductions of famous Italian Renaissance artworks. So combining these different cultural traditions into one series of illustrations. And these here are a series of works by Chris Roshka, who was a frequent collaborator with Radunsky. And this is for the book called Mother Goose of Pudding Lane. So looking at the story of Elizabeth Foster, who's believed to be the real Mother Goose. And these extraordinary portraits of her and her family member, and then all of the characters and animals that are featured in Mother Goose nursery rhymes. And this was sadly Radunsky's last book that he worked on before he passed away that year. So it was really wonderful to be able to showcase that. We also did an exhibition in 22-23 of Rutgers professor Brittany Cooper's first book for children, Stand Up, 10 Mighty Women Who Made a Change, which tells the story of 10 Black women and girls who, through their bravery, really changed the course of our country. So it's everyone from Ruby Bridges and Ida B. Wells to Mari Kopeni, who's a young activist in Flint, Michigan, fighting for clean water. And this was a first for us because the illustrator Kathy Ann Johnson worked digitally. So typically in our collection, we have original works of art that we showcase. So for this exhibition, we did reproductions of the illustrations, but then borrowed a wide variety of preparatory material. So everything from drawings and photographs to, you can see in the lower right, this is an actual cloth doll that was made based on the character of the little girl that guides you through the story and that you see on the front cover. We then did a show of the illustrations for a book that came out in 23 called You Gotta Meet Mr. Pierce, the storied life of folk artist Elijah Pierce. So this was a biography of Elijah Pierce, who's considered one of the preeminent folk artists in America who worked in wood carving. And he also, in his day job, he was a barber, and his barber shop served as sort of like a studio community space where he both created his wood carvings and also displayed them. And interestingly, Jennifer Mack Watkins, who was the illustrator for this book, she made all of the illustrations in woodcut, which is very rare to see in such a large scale book production. Woodcuts can be very labor intensive to make, but it was a nod to Elijah's work himself. And we were also very lucky we were able to borrow some of the original wood carvings from a local collector and have them on view in the show.
Fantastic, Nicole. We're going to need to move on.
Okay.
Do you have any other? I mean, amazing. I can't wait to come.
I'll just tell you the show we currently have up. We're
Yeah.
just doing something a little bit different there. This is called Boundless Picture Books About Disability, where we actually turn the gallery space into a reading room.
Wow.
And this is in conjunction with a large special exhibition we have called Smoke and Mirrors, which features the work by contemporary artists with disabilities. And here you can come, it's over 40 picture books. You can read, you can hang out in there. There are art activities. And I'll say that this list was curated by the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art, who generously agreed to work with us to bring this show here.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Have you had children in the exhibit already? I mean, what did they do?
So we have, and you can see on the wall on the left,
Oh.
where people can, we have little prompts, people can draw and then add it to the wall there. So
Oh,
we've
fun.
had many people come in and see it, and it will be up through the end of December.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. I'm going to toss it to Marc.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to try to speak quickly. So one of the treats for me of going to Bologna and teaching the international class is seeing what to me is really fresh and striking in that's being done around the world in picture books. And what I was blown away by last year were the Koreans. And so I'm going to show you some work from different Korean illustrators and authors, and I'll explain a little bit why I think they're so spectacular. We have one link, you'll see it first. The Korean illustrator who's easiest to find in America is Susie Lee, who won the Hans Christian Andersen Medal several years ago. Hans Christian Medal is given every 2 years, and there's one for illustration and one for writing. So it's in effect like having Newbery and Caldecott. She's published here by Chronicle, and so you can get her books and get them in English. This is a little video. Unfortunately, this is a wordless picture book, but some genius had the idea of explaining to you what you're seeing, which I really wish they wouldn't. I wish you would just see it. But if Connie, if you can run a little bit of it, you'll get some of the sense of what Susie Lee does.
I will. Yep, just a second. Okay.
And I'm beginning with her. She's sort of the on-ramp. Yes. Not sure I'm seeing.
Hold on, guys.
This is the other one, and that's okay. This is not Susie Lee.
Oh.
That's Susie Lee. Okay, that's enough of that. That's enough, Connie. I just can't stand being told what I'm seeing. The next book that we had teed up is showing you a very different kind of Korean picture book where you can only see the book if you put a flashlight behind each page. So let's see a little bit of that. Let's stop this. So that's one kind of book experiment. I'm now going to show you another book. I showed this yesterday to Claudia, who I think quite liked it. So this has a few words in Korean, which I don't read, but you don't need words.
Oh, okay. We can see a guy taking, okay. Ah, all right. That one's hard to see. What is that a picture of, Mark?
She's eating, and
Oh.
dad is feeding her.
It's the child. Okay, got it.
Child is being fed. Now the dad is teaching her how to ride a bicycle. And now they're out fishing, they're out in nature. And she's getting a little older, and wait till you see we arrive at adolescence.
Hmm.
And then the picture starts to blur a little bit. And it's becoming choppy
You're breaking my heart, Mark. I see where this is going.
and tangled. And
Mm.
he's walking alone. And she has the camera. And she is comforting him. And playing with him. And going out in nature with him. They're by the seashore together. And now she's feeding him. And they're one last walk in nature. And now she's holding his hand. And I just think that is such a narrative, such a full story told entirely visually. I mean, there's some words there, but so powerfully and so vividly. So that's showing some of the things the Koreans are doing.
Do you have a title on that or anything? Do you know what the title is?
I can find out. I did manage, actually, one of my
I'm just
colleagues,
curious what they title such a book.
one of my colleagues who reads Korean got it for me, and so I can find out from her.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and open it up for some questions.
Wait, I have
Megan,
one
you had
more
a
thing I
question
have to
earlier.
show.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
So the
sorry.
book that absolutely takes my breath away, and I have to show you, it's going to be a little hard, but this is a prize-winning book. It's called Tomorrow Will Be a Sunny Day. So I have to tell you a very quick story. If you take my children's literature class, cover your ears, because I'm about to tell you something that I tell everybody, which is if you were going to illustrate Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you might think, here's a page, and you'd say, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and you'd have somebody here. But another way you could do that is you'd have a spread, and you'd have a child perhaps on a bed and a window over here, and the words twinkle, twinkle, and the words looking up. You would use the space differently. When I mentioned that to the great Czech American picture book creator, Peter Sees, he said, or maybe you won't have a star at all. In other words, it doesn't
Mark,
have to.
and speaking of Peter Cease, I've let me go find one of.
Okay, but let me just finish. I
have
now
this
want to show
children's
you,
book.
this is a book called Tomorrow Will Be a Sunny Day. Look how they use the space of the book. to convey what it is when it's sunny. Look how the 2 pages are transformed. It's not about literal sun. Look at that yellow light. And look at that line at the bottom of yellowness, of sunlight. And look how it takes over the page and how it becomes layers and how people follow it. Now the page is totally transformed.
Hmm.
And in all kinds of different ways. And this to me is the Koreans just experimenting and experimenting with what you can do in illustration for young people. It's just, I think it, to me, and I'd be interested in what Claudia and Nicole say, it takes these rectangles that we think we know and fills them in completely new ways that makes you see the potential of those spaces in completely new ways. So that's what I see in the Koreans, and I think is so riveting. But yes, Connie, you wanted people to.
No, I am blown away by that too. And I was thinking about just what you said about I guess having breaking the rules. Are not even considering this set of rules over here, but playing by something that a set of rules that is so refreshing to my eye.
Someone
So,
just asked, is there a way to a good source? I've helped to create something called the starter kit for allowing librarians to have access to international youth literature. I can share the link for that. But Korean materials in Korean, I don't know of a good source for. I don't know if you do, Claudia.
I think it's just expensive to get foreign books. Here it's you can find them online, but it's expensive to get them shipped, and that's it. I think it's a little bit, it's for me, it's kind of prohibitively expensive. It's an expensive thing to do to find those books. Yeah.
and do you find that libraries are getting copies and lending them out, or no?
I think it's very limited. If you, New York
Yeah.
Public, large cities with significant Korean language, or for example, New York Public does very well, for example, on Chinese language books because it has a population and they have sources. But I think for regular libraries with more limited budgets, it's more challenging. That's partially why we bring
Yeah.
books back, and we're creating at Alexander this collection that has a traveling collection so that a library can get a
Oh, that's a
traveling
great idea.
collection from us.
Fantastic.
And everything that is in the traveling collection will have an extra copy of in the library. So if you find that people in your community love book X, you can interlibrary loan that from us.
That is a great idea. Megan, you had a question earlier, I think. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
You've written it as
Maybe not. I believe it was about how do you find and advertise and get these books into the hands of readers. I think it was directed towards Claudia.
Right. So it's a question about how these picture books are brought to the
Oh, there
attention
it
of
is.
teen and adult readers. I mean, we submit them for review. We tend to submit them for both YA and adult review to get the best option for coverage. And we have gotten quite good reviews for quite a number of the books, so that helps. Also, some indie bookstores now are doing a shelf of picture books for adults, and that's another great option for discovering these books. I wish more bookstores would do it. It's starting really slow, and there are not that many that do it. I think if more did, it would be of real benefit to readers, and it would allow for more discoverability of really unusual books, because we're not the only publisher publishing picture books for adults. There are other small presses, and interestingly, there are even some big corporate presses who have done a few of those books, and they're hard to find. So there's that bookshelf. You know, I do think they're tricky to find in libraries. It all depends on like how they're cataloged, and that can be very much open to interpretation and kind of confusing, and maybe libraries don't even buy them because of that. But we do a lot of social media. We use tools like newsletters and other communications to reach our wide community, and sort of we have certain sub communities that we reach in different ways. So we're using as much social as we can to do that, I would say.
I would add for picture books, you know, there is the Batchelder, which is the ALA Award for Books in Translation.
Yeah, the Batchelder, I forget the age. They all have
Up to
cutoffs. I mean, some
14.
of them go
It's
up, but
up
I think
to
the Batchelder
14.
is 14.
It is. And then we have GLLI has the YA Book in Translation Prize, but it
Right.
doesn't have the same clout. It's not an ALA prize.
But it doesn't have the same cutoff too. So you would be looking at more at YA books. So that's
Yeah.
a great benefit. Yeah.
Well, maybe you guys should start your own prize.
Well, we have started. There
That's
is
what yeah.
yeah. But I do think that look, libraries are a channel, reviews are a channel, but the other is social net. And the thing is for you
Word of
guys,
mouth, social networks. Yeah.
Are they
I-
being stocked in, again, the corporate or the commercial bookshops, the Barnes and Nobles, the Hudsons? Do you ever see them there?
I would say we have very few of any of our books picked up by those outlets. That Barnes and Noble has been, it's been very few books over 21 years that have gone into Barnes and Noble, and
Hmm.
the books that we've had go there are usually after major awards and recognitions, when they decide to bring the book in kind of after the fact. But they're not early adopters, for sure not. Yeah.
That's too bad.
well, it's partially name recognition. In other words, they're counting on people coming in knowing that
Exactly. They're counting on people coming in.
and that's I
Which
think
makes it difficult to debut anybody. I mean, not just a book in translation, but if you're going to publish a first-time author or illustrator here who has no track record, you know, it's going to be just as hard and as much of a challenge as publishing a book in translation.
But I would say to all of you, that's why we're introducing all of this to you guys, because you are people who will be in contact with a significant public, a public that in some cases will be drawn to materials because they're from their homeland or their parents' or grandmother's homeland. In some cases, because they're just interested in different art styles. And I think Claudia was saying something to me yesterday, which I think is really true. There are different conceptions of childhood. Different countries have different or cultures, images of what a child is. And all of those kinds of children are here. And so books that reach a child who isn't exactly the same as the kid sitting next to him or her or them, you know, we want to have books for all those children that come from all these different worldviews.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that librarians are instrumental in disseminating, you know, diverse literature of all kinds, and they're great proponents of translation in the library world. And many of those librarians have actually served what we're doing and what other publishers are doing really, really well, because they do get the books into readers' hands and into communities. And they're real advocates for that point of view, for that cultural point of view, which is that if you're reading books in translation, they're not only different ideas of childhood, but they're different ideas of death and life and value and so many things. And so that you really are benefited from a young age on to have access to that kind of richness of conception and understanding of life and people elsewhere.
Right.
So
Um,
we're great supporters of libraries and librarians.
We're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you guys all to kind of reflect a little bit about what we were talking about before the colloquium started, which was this idea that children's literature and children's book art is a place where core values come through in a real beautiful and non-political way. And I wondered if you would, all of you, kind of reflect a little bit on that.
Well, I think the idea of in a picture book, and we're talking now at the younger end, although again, we've talked
I'm
older.
having trouble hearing you, Mark.
Oh, I would say that illustration at any age can communicate very directly. Illustration and design is extremely narrative, and it can have very direct impact. And I think in that sense can communicate quite deeply, even without text, or it's a direct impact. And so I think what we're exploring is many kinds of books that offer that direct connection. And
Yeah.
just give one word here and then pass it over to the two of you. One thing you see in Bologna, there's a lot of books that are simply beautiful. And I don't mean pretty, I mean beautiful. And I think that is something, that's a gift to give someone access to beauty. And that is what these books can do.
I'm gonna
Do you want to say
flash.
something, Nicole?
Oh, sure. I think a common sort of um, belief we have as to why do we have this children's collection in an art museum is that typically most children's first exposure to art is not in a museum itself, but it's through a picture book.
So
So I
true.
think all of the richness that we as adult visitors get from visiting an art museum, from learning about history, communicating with artists, as Marc talked about, experiencing pure visual beauty is something that we can get through children's illustration. It is art itself. And I think that's why it's important for us at the Zimmerli to have it in the museum, to put it in the context of our understanding of the history of art. And yeah, Claudia, I don't want to take up your
Beautifully
time.
said, Nicole. Claudia?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on what both Marc and Nicole have said, I mean, I think, if you go back to ancient Greece, you have the good, the true, and the beautiful, and that there is an ethos to beauty. And if you share beauty with young readers and they develop a sense of the beautiful, it leads you into an ethic of care. It leads you into an ethic of appreciation. It leads you into an ethic of love. You don't want to destroy what you love. You don't want to harm what's beautiful. And so, beauty is not just ornament, and it's not just prettiness or cuteness. It is literally an ethos and a way of embracing life and seeing the world. And so by offering that to young readers, I think we're doing all those other things at the same time.
That was beautifully said.
That was also beautifully said.
Thank
So I want all of these books. Peter, you had a couple of things. You had a book that you wanted to show us?
Oh, do I? Boy, do I have something to show you.
Okay.
Let me talk with you about here. Can I share my screen to show you?
Just real quick. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up here because we're at time, but I did want to give you the
Nicole,
opportunity.
I also wanted to tell you that we've published Du Voisin and we've also published Radunsky.
Oh, wonderful.
We
published The Happy Hunter from Du Voisin.
Here's
Yeah.
Toshio Iwai.
Okay, so what are we looking at, Peter?
This is the books of the 100-story houses. There are plenty of books to be in.
Wow. Okay, and this is a resource that you have available?
I've seen this.
Oh, what do you know? Unbelievable. Who said that? Who's seen it before?
Dr. Aronson.
I have this.
Marc!
Yes.
Marc, you've seen this book before?
Yes, one of them, yes.
Well, it is magistral.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're at 8:04, and again, we like to keep a timely ship. So I am going to call our evening
Okay.
call it an evening at this point in time, and want to really thank our guests, Claudia and Nicole, for spending some time with us. And Marc, of course, always great to have you host. And you always do this with this thing about traveling on the day you do colloquium. So I guess it's our thing. Anyway,
All
thank
right,
you
cool.
everybody for joining us. We'll stick around for a few minutes after that, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. So thank
right.
you and have a great evening.
Thanks all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
you.